I woke up to sunlight spilling lazily through the blinds, painting stripes across the bedroom floor. There was that quiet morning stillness, the kind that makes you think everything is okay, like the world has paused just for a moment, letting you breathe. I rolled over, feeling the soft weight of the sheets and, for a second, the warmth of her side of the bed. She was already awake, scrolling through her phone, fingers tapping silently against the screen that I watched her for a moment, sipping in the small, familiar rhythm of our mornings. Even on the calmest days, there's a tension you notice if you're paying attention. Not bad, just quiet, lingering. Like the tiny spaces between words when you're not sure if a conversation is safe to start. I shook it off. Today wasn't about that. Today was my brother's wedding. I got up, my feet cold against the hardwood floor, and padded into the kitchen. Coffee brewing, the aroma filling the room like a gentle promise that the day would feel normal. I glanced at the counter where the wedding invitation sat, slightly curled at the edges, bright and festive. My brother's name printed in bold. Happy letters. This was his day, and I wanted to celebrate it fully, despite the little shadows in my mind. Packing my suit, I tried to anticipate the day ahead. Seeing relatives I hadn't seen in months, the hugs, the laughter, the teasing. My mother probably would have reminded me not to spill coffee on my tie, and my dad would have grumbled about traffic as though it was his life's mission to be right about everything. And my brother, I could picture him, grinning like he had some secret I didn't know, full of that reckless energy that used to make our childhood both exhausting and unforgettable. That I caught myself in the mirror, adjusting my collar, brushing down my hair, studying the reflection of a man who felt ready for happiness but carried this tiny knot of unease somewhere deep in his chest. My wife appeared behind me, leaning on the doorframe, giving me that small, knowing smile she sometimes did, half affectionate, half something I couldn't quite name. I waved it away in my head, telling myself I was imagining things, she said. Something about the weather, and I nodded, focusing on the coffee in my hands. I tried to savor the calm, the hum of the refrigerator, the gentle clink of spoons against mugs, the distant birds outside. Today was supposed to be light, celebratory, filled with joy. But there was a subtle edge beneath it all, like a single note out of tune in an otherwise perfect song. And yet, despite that whisper of unease, I felt content. I took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of the cup, the sunlight brushing against my skin, and whispered to myself, this is going to be a good day. A day to remember. By the time we got into the car, the streets were alive with wedding traffic. Cars honking, people rushing, the smell of street food and exhaust mingling in a strange, familiar perfume of city life. I tried to focus on the excitement of the day, the music in my head playing some imaginary soundtrack of celebration. But then she spoke, casually at first, a remark so ordinary I almost didn't register it. Are you sure you want to wear that tie? She said, glancing at me with a faint frown. Her tone wasn't harsh. It was measured, almost too calm. But something about it lingered, prickling at the edge of my consciousness. I laughed it off. Yeah, it's fine. What? I asked, trying to keep the mood light. Just it's your brother's wedding, she said, eyes flicking to the rearview mirror as if checking something behind us. You know how people can be. I smiled, but inside, a tiny seed of unease began to grow. That casual, almost throwaway remark. It wasn't quite right. I wanted to dismiss it. Maybe she was just stressed, nervous about the day, but my mind couldn't help circling it. There was something there, something I wasn't supposed to notice, something she didn't want me to see. That we drove in silence for a while after that, the hum of the engine filling the gaps. I found myself scanning her face, looking for clues. Reading expressions I thought I knew like an open book. She was calm, composed, her hands steady on the wheel. Yet, her jaw tightened just a fraction. The way someone holds a secret they're not ready to share. I thought back to the small moments over the last few weeks. The way she suddenly insisted on choosing the music for every little thing. The way she avoided answering certain questions about her friends. The quiet sighs when I mentioned family. None of it had seemed significant at the time. Now, driving through the city with sunlight bouncing off the buildings, it all felt like a series of tiny warning lights I had ignored. That I tried to shake it off. Don't ruin today before it even starts, I told myself. We were going to a wedding, day for laughter, for clinking glasses, for my brother to take a huge step forward in his life. Focus on that, I whispered under my breath, trying to drown out the little voice of suspicion curling like smoke at the back of my mind. But there was no denying it. A quiet tension had settled between us, soft as the hum of the tires on asphalt, but persistent. Something was simmering, and I had no idea what it was yet. The thought made my stomach twist ever so slightly, a small, subtle unease I couldn't shake. And even though I tried to convince myself otherwise, I knew today would not be as simple as it seemed in the morning light that we pulled into the parking lot, and the first wave of celebration hit me like a punch of color and sound. Strings of fairy lights hung over the entrance, fluttering slightly in the breeze. The faint scent of fresh flowers mingled with the warm, sweet aroma of fried snacks from the street vendors outside. Music floated from inside the hall, a mix of traditional tunes and upbeat songs that made my chest tighten with a mix of excitement and nerves that I stepped out of the car, straightening my jacket, adjusting my tie for the third time. People were already arriving, laughing and greeting each other with hugs that carried years of familiarity. My brother was there, grinning like he'd won some invisible lottery, shaking hands, taking photos, all while making jokes that left everyone around him chuckling. Seeing him so happy, so alive, made my chest ache in a way I couldn't quite explain. I wanted to soak it all in, to be fully present in this moment that was supposed to be purely joyful. But then I noticed the subtle shifts in the crowd, the whispers, the sideways glances, the slight stiffening when my wife walked beside me. It wasn't blatant, nothing to call attention to, but I caught it. People who usually greeted me warmly now offered half smiles. Conversations paused for a moment too long when we passed. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was my imagination. Weddings make people awkward. That's normal, right? She linked her arm with mine, and I felt that little twinge again, the unease coiling in my stomach. Her smile was there, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Something had changed in the air, something I couldn't name. I had the fleeting thought, maybe I'm imagining things. Maybe it's just nerves. As we moved further inside, the hall revealed itself fully. Tables draped in crisp white cloths, centerpieces of roses and lilies catching the light, crystal glasses that reflected the golden glow of the chandeliers. Guests chatted in clusters, their voices blending into a soft murmur, punctuated by laughter and the occasional clink of silverware. I felt the warmth of it all, the life of the celebration, and I wanted to dive in, to lose myself in it. But the edge of tension lingered like a shadow at the corner of my vision that I caught sight of my brother across the room, his best friend clapping him on the back, both of them laughing over something trivial. I remembered a Sunday a few months back when we'd sat in his tiny apartment just talking, joking, not thinking about weddings, not thinking about family obligations, just existing in that carefree bubble of brotherhood. That memory hit me sharply, a pang of nostalgia mixed with something heavier, a subtle, unnameable dread that we made our way to the front, taking our seats, and I felt that quiet, nagging feeling again. Something had shifted, just a little, and I couldn't shake the thought that today wasn't going to unfold as smoothly as I had imagined in the calm of my bedroom that morning. Yet, I told myself, for now, I'd let the laughter, the music, the celebration carry me. For now, I would let the wedding be what it was supposed to be, a moment of joy before the storm I couldn't see yet. The music swelled, laughter spilling around us, and I felt my chest lighten just a little, letting the joy of the wedding take over. My brother was beside me now, waving at someone across the room, and I couldn't help but grin. This was supposed to be a day of celebration, a day where family came together and nothing else mattered. Then she leaned close, her voice low, almost too calm. "I think you should leave," she said, and I froze, coffee cup halfway to my lips, the liquid shaking slightly in the mug. For a moment, I thought she was joking, some bizarre attempt at humor in the middle of the chaos. "What?" I asked, my voice caught somewhere between confusion and disbelief. She didn't flinch. "I'm serious. You need to leave the wedding." The words hung in the air like smoke, thick and choking. My brain refused to process them immediately. I blinked, looked around as if someone else might clarify that this was a prank, a misunderstanding. But no one seemed to notice. Everyone was caught up in their own celebrations, oblivious to the earthquake happening at my side. "Why?" I asked finally, trying to keep my voice steady. My heart was hammering. "That's sick," twisting kind of panic that comes when everything familiar suddenly turns alien. She looked at me, not angry, not harsh, just resolute. And that made it worse. It wasn't a flare of temper. It was calm, deliberate. "I can't explain it here," she said. "Not in front of everyone." I laughed then, but it came out. Sharp and brittle, like breaking glass. "You can't explain it here? What the hell does that mean?" My hands gripped the back of my chair so tightly I thought my knuckles might crack. My mind was spinning, refusing to land on any rational explanation. A prank? A joke? Some misunderstanding? I couldn't see any scenario that made sense. She didn't answer immediately. She just looked away, and the moment stretched painfully, every second dragging like hours. I felt the world tilt slightly, the music and laughter around us muffled, as if reality itself had softened, leaving me suspended in disbelief. The people around us, smiling, talking, clinking glasses, felt like strangers, moving in a reality I no longer belonged to. Then a flood of memories hit me. Small, insignificant moments that suddenly seemed loaded with meaning. Her sudden insistence on private phone calls, subtle silences that had always made me uncomfortable, fleeting expressions she'd never explained. Each memory was a tiny pulse of unease, now converging into a blinding, painful clarity. "Look, we need to step outside," she finally said, her hand lightly on my arm. The touch, meant to reassure, felt like fire, and I flinched away. My stomach churned, my mind screaming, "Why? What is happening? Why now?" I glanced at my brother, laughing, unaware, blissfully immersed in his happiness. And then I realized, whatever was coming, it wasn't about him. This was something else. Something I hadn't seen coming. And for the first time since that calm morning, I felt utterly unmoored. We stepped out into the corridor, away from the laughter, the music, the golden glow of celebration spilling from the hall. The sudden quiet was deafening. The faint hum of the air conditioner, the soft shuffle of shoes against the marble floor, it all felt unreal, like the world had paused just for this impossible conversation. My chest was tight, my hands shaking slightly, and every instinct in me screamed that this wasn't normal. "Why?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, though the echo in the hallway made it sound much louder. "Why would you want me to leave? What's going on?" She hesitated, her eyes flicking to the ground for a moment, and I felt a twinge of fear I hadn't experienced in years. The calmness in her voice before had been maddening, almost cruel, but now the pause made it worse. I wanted answers. I needed them. And every second she stayed silent stretched my mind thin, like a rope pulled taut, ready to snap. I can't explain it here," she murmured again. Her fingers fidgeted with the strap of her purse, a small, almost imperceptible gesture that suddenly felt like a scream. "Not here. Not now." I ran a hand through my hair, feeling the heat rise in my chest, trying to anchor myself to some rational thought. But my mind raced anyway, throwing every possibility at me, each more terrifying than the last. Was it my brother? Something about the family? Or was it me? The thought struck like ice, sending a shiver down my spine. I thought back to the last few weeks, replaying moments that had seemed insignificant at the time. The abrupt phone call she'd taken outside, the subtle avoidance when I asked questions about her friends, that quiet sigh after I mentioned family gatherings. At the time, I'd brushed them off as stress or just me overthinking. But now, each memory felt like a breadcrumb leading to a truth I wasn't ready to see. "I need to understand," I said finally, my voice cracking just slightly. "You're not making sense. This isn't normal." She looked at me then, really looked, and I could see the hesitation, the weight of something enormous pressing down behind her eyes. "It's complicated," she said softly. "I promise it's not what you think, but I can't say more here." Her words only fueled the storm in my mind. Not what I think. Not what I think. Then what could it be? I could feel my heartbeat in my throat, each pulse loud and accusing. The corridor seemed narrower, the walls closer, as if the air itself was conspiring to trap me in this suffocating uncertainty. That I tried to reason with her, to plead for even the smallest fragment of truth, but she shook her head gently. "I'll explain later. You have to trust me." Trust. That word felt like a knife, twisting in a wound I didn't know I had. How do you trust someone when they're standing right in front of you, shielding you from a truth that might change everything? I wanted to scream, to shake her, to demand the honesty that was clawing at my mind. But all I could do was swallow hard, feeling a mix of anger, fear, and an ache I couldn't name, yet we stood there, suspended in that quiet hallway. Two people in the middle of a celebration that no longer felt like mine. I didn't know it yet, but that moment, the words, the pause, the impossible tension, was the first fracture in everything I thought I knew about my life that we finally stepped into a small, quiet lounge just off the main hall. The chatter of the wedding seemed miles away, muffled behind closed doors, and for a moment, the silence pressed against me like a living thing. My heart was hammering, my stomach twisting in knots, and every fiber of me wanted her to just say the words, to spill the secret that had been dangling between us all morning. She looked at me then, eyes steady but heavy, like she had been carrying something too massive for her own shoulders. And in that instant, I realized she couldn't hide it any longer, not if I was going to keep asking. She drew a deep breath, and I swear I could hear the weight of 1,000 unspoken truths pressing down in that single inhalation. It's about your brother, she said finally, her voice low and deliberate. My stomach dropped. My mind raced, flipping through every possible scenario, none of them good. I felt my hands clench into fists, nails digging into my palms. He asked me to do something, she continued, and I could see her hesitation, the struggle in her eyes. Something I didn't want to, but I couldn't say no. I blinked, trying to process, trying to anchor myself to the moment, but everything felt like it was sliding. What do you mean? I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper, her eyes filled with a quiet urgency. He wanted you. Gone. Tonight. He didn't want you there. The words hit me like ice water. My chest tightened, and the world seemed to tilt. I laughed then, bitter and hollow, unable to contain the shock. Are you joking? My brother? He what? She shook her head, swallowing hard. It's complicated. He made a mistake years ago, something you didn't know about. And he didn't want you to find out tonight. Not at the wedding, not with everyone watching. I promised him I'd keep it quiet until later. I felt a flash of memories surge through me. Old conversations, small moments that didn't make sense before, now suddenly falling into place like puzzle pieces I never wanted to see. My mind reeled, trying to reconcile the brother I thought I knew with this secret he had carried. This truth that changed everything in an instant. You're serious? I whispered, and my voice trembled, betraying the shock I felt. My hands shook, and I felt an ache spreading from my chest down to my knees, a numbness mixed with fury and heartbreak. I am, she said softly. I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't want to ruin the wedding. But I had to tell you. You had to know. I sank into a chair, my mind spinning. I could see her there, standing in front of me, the wedding lights spilling faintly through the small window, but I felt miles away from everything familiar. Every laugh from the hall, every clink of glasses, every warm hug I had imagined earlier. It all felt like a cruel joke that I wanted to scream, to cry, to demand answers, to shake her, to shake him, to shake the world itself for placing me here. But all I could do was sit there, feeling the weight of a truth I had never seen coming, a revelation that shattered the calm I had woken up to that morning that I stepped out onto the balcony, letting the night air hit me like a cold slap. The city lights below twinkled, indifferent, while inside, laughter and music continued like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Every assumption I had about my family, my brother, even my marriage, suddenly, it felt fragile, like it could shatter with the slightest touch. I leaned on the railing, staring at the distant streets, trying to breathe, trying to make sense of the impossible. My mind kept replaying her words, each syllable looping in my head. He didn't want you there. He made a mistake years ago. It was like a puzzle I couldn't solve, pieces jagged and sharp, cutting into my chest every time I tried to force them together. I remembered moments that now felt like warnings I had ignored. The subtle tension when my brother laughed too hard at a joke, the fleeting looks my wife exchanged with him during family gatherings, the sudden need to leave a room when certain topics came up. Back then, I had brushed them off, thinking I was overthinking. Now, each memory stung like salt on an open wound that I ran a hand through my hair, feeling the weight of betrayal pressed down on my shoulders. I wanted to call someone, anyone, to shout, to scream, to make this real in the only way my mind could. process, but I stayed silent, listening instead to the faint hum of traffic below and the distant echo of music from inside. Isolation wrapped around me, suffocating yet strangely familiar. I tried to talk myself through it. It's not real yet. I haven't seen the evidence. I haven't confronted him. Maybe it's not as bad as it sounds. But every rational thought collided with gut-deep intuition. This was serious, serious enough to rip apart the carefully stitched life I had believed in. I could feel my body reacting before my mind could catch up. Stomach knotting, chest tightening, hands trembling. I wanted to sit, lie down, scream into the night. But I remained standing, anchored by the railing as if it were the only thing keeping me from floating into chaos. And yet, beneath the storm of fear, shock, and hurt, there was something else, something quieter but persistent. A thread of clarity that whispered, "You need to see this for yourself. You need to understand before you react." I didn't know if that voice was courage or cowardice, but I clung to it anyway. Time seemed to stretch, each second heavy with the weight of a truth that refused to settle. I thought about my brother, imagining him unaware of the whirlwind I was caught in, still smiling, still joking, oblivious to the fracture I now carried in my chest. I thought about my wife, standing silently nearby, waiting for me to grasp what she had revealed. And I realized that for all the shock, for all the betrayal, the first step toward any sense of control or closure was to let myself feel it. To sit with the ache, the confusion, the heartbreak, without pretending it didn't exist. Because ignoring it, pretending it wasn't real, would only make the eventual confrontation that much more devastating. That I took a deep breath, letting the night air fill my lungs, and whispered to myself, "I have to face this. I have to understand. Even if it breaks me." I walked back into the hall, the golden light of the chandeliers now feeling harsh, almost accusing. Every laugh, every clink of glasses, every joyful hug seemed to mock the turmoil roiling inside me. My brother noticed me almost immediately, his grin faltering as he caught the tension in my posture, the storm in my eyes. That I forced a smile, one that didn't reach anywhere near my eyes, and greeted him with a nod. He patted my shoulder, oblivious to the weight pressing down on me. But I couldn't stay blind to the subtle signs around me, the hushed whispers that stopped as I approached, the sideways glances of relatives, the faint tightening in my wife's jaw as she followed me through the crowd. That I tried to engage in small talk, to anchor myself in the familiar rhythms of family interaction, but every word felt strained, artificial. The laughter and cheer around me was a soundtrack to a scene I no longer felt part of, a life I couldn't access anymore. I caught myself replaying the last few weeks in my head, each interaction with my brother now tainted by suspicion. What had been genuine? What had been hidden behind smiles and casual jokes? I remembered sitting together on the couch during one quiet evening, our laughter soft and easy, thinking nothing of the shadows behind his eyes. I thought about past disagreements that now seemed petty, fleeting moments of tension I had never understood. Could they have been cracks I ignored? Pieces of a larger truth I wasn't ready to see. My wife stayed close, silent but watchful, like a sentinel guarding a secret I was desperate to uncover. I wanted to demand answers right then, confront him in front of everyone, but I forced myself to hold back. I knew that explosion would change everything permanently. I wanted to understand before I acted. I found a moment when my brother stepped aside, chatting with a cousin, and I approached him, voice low but steady. "We need to talk," I said. Just those 4 words carried the weight of weeks, of years, of unspoken truths. His face went pale for a fraction of a second, and I thought I saw guilt. Or maybe it was fear. That we moved to a quieter corner, away from prying eyes, and I finally let my questions tumble out, each one sharp, pointed, cutting through the pretense of celebration. He answered, haltingly at first, then more openly as the dam broke. The conversation was a mixture of anger, disbelief, and bitter laughter at absurd circumstances that had been hidden for so long. Around us, the wedding continued, guests laughing, music playing, a world moving on as if nothing had happened. But for me, that moment was everything. It was the collision of past and present, the reckoning of family, loyalty, and truth. I felt exposed, raw, and yet there was a strange relief in confronting the reality I had been circling in confusion all day. To be why the end. I was shaking, not just from anger, but from the emotional overload, from the clash of love, betrayal, and heartbreak that filled the space between us. I realized that life didn't pause for our pain. It continued relentlessly. And now, having faced the truth head on, I had to find a way to navigate it, to live in a reality that was irrevocably altered. After the confrontation, I couldn't stay in the hall any longer. I walked out into the night, the cool air hitting my skin like a shock, each breath sharp and jagged in my chest. The music, the laughter, the golden glow of celebration, it all felt like it belonged to someone else, a life I wasn't part of anymore. My legs carried me without thought, stepping onto empty streets, past flickering streetlights and the distant hum of traffic, until I found a quiet corner to stop and let it all catch up with me that I sank onto the curb, hands trembling, head in, my palms, feeling the weight of everything pressing down at once. The shock, the betrayal, the disbelief. It was too much, a flood of emotions I had no way to channel. My chest heaved as sobs threatened to break through, and I let them come, bitter and raw, without shame. I thought about my brother, the one I had loved and trusted, and the betrayal that now stretched like a canyon between us. I thought about my wife, standing silently beside me through the revelation and the complicated ache of knowing she had protected me in her own way. And I thought about myself, lost in a storm of grief and confusion, trying to reconcile a life I had believed in with the shattering truth I had uncovered. Memories surged unexpectedly, the quiet Sunday afternoons. With my brother, the careless laughter, the tiny moments that had once felt insignificant but now were imbued with unspoken meaning. I replayed them over and over, each one twisting the knife a little deeper. Each smile and joke now laced with irony and heartbreak, but I didn't care about the people passing by, their curious glances, or the city moving relentlessly around me. I didn't care about the cold concrete beneath me or the wind whipping my hair across my face. All I could feel was the raw, searing ache of loss, the helplessness of having no way to undo the truth I had just learned that I screamed into the empty night, a single, guttural sound that carried nothing but despair. My voice cracked and broke, swallowed by the distant hum of the city, and for the first time in years, I let myself completely fall apart. There was no armor, no pretense, just me, unraveling, stripped bare by shock and heartbreak, and in that moment of utter collapse, a strange clarity came with it. I realized that feeling this fully, letting myself break, was the only way I could ever hope to move forward. The pain was unbearable, yes, but it was also real. It was the first step toward understanding, toward acceptance, toward reclaiming a life that had been suddenly and violently altered. That I stayed there for what felt like hours, letting the tears and anguish wash over me, until the edges of the night began to soften, and I could finally draw a shaky, trembling breath. The next morning, the world felt quieter, softer somehow, as if it had waited for me to wake and start again. I didn't go back to the wedding hall. I didn't replay the events in my head for the 100th time. Instead, I walked slowly through the city streets, letting the early sunlight warm my face, the smell of fresh rain lingering in the air. Each step was deliberate, a reminder that life kept moving. Even when I felt like I had been left behind, that I thought about everything that had happened, the lies, the secrets, the betrayal, and the heartbreak that had nearly consumed me. For the first time, I let myself sit with it without judgment. I didn't try to fix it, didn't try to reason with it. I just felt it, all of it, like a heavy cloak I could finally set down, if only for a little while. I called my brother later. That day, we didn't talk about the wedding. We didn't rehash the secrets. We just spoke, awkwardly at first, then a little easier, like testing the waters of something fragile but salvageable. I realized that confrontation had been necessary, that reckoning with the truth had opened the door to something new, a chance, maybe, to rebuild trust, or at least understand the pieces that had been hidden. I stopped by a quiet cafe, ordered a coffee, and watched the city move around me. People laughed, children ran, and life unfolded in all its ordinary, chaotic beauty. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. I thought about my wife, about her role in keeping me safe from the shock until I was ready, and I felt a complex mix of gratitude and lingering pain. She hadn't made it easy. But she had kept me from falling apart in front of everyone, from facing it before I could process it. That I walked slowly home, letting the sunlight stretch across my face, the sounds of the city filling the spaces inside me where grief had lived. I didn't know what the future held, if my relationships could be repaired, if trust could ever fully return. But I did know one thing. I had survived the storm. I had faced a truth that shook the very foundations of my life. And I had come out the other side, raw but intact. I opened the front door, stepped inside, and breathed in the familiar scent of home. The day was beginning anew, and so was I. I sat down, closed my eyes, and let myself feel something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Not complete peace, not naive happiness, but a quiet, steady sense that life, with all its chaos, betrayal, and heartbreak, could still carry me forward. And as I let that feeling settle, a soft smile crossed my face. I wasn't okay, not yet, but I was moving forward. And sometimes, that alone is enough.